All right, we are live. This is the July 8th, 2025 episode of Ask a Clutter Boss, the internet's best weekly decluttering advice show. Good morning, Denise. Hello, hello. Nice to see you here. If you're joining us live, please say hi in the comments. And if you're on replay, give us a hashtag replay. We have a couple of questions that came in, and then I have had many one-on-one calls with clients this morning. And during these calls, I was reminded of some little tips that I can share on Ask the Clutter Boss. So thank you to those clients this morning who helped jog my memory of different things that we can talk about. It's so interesting hearing the different struggles that we have during the decluttering process and just how sort of common they all are. So these little reminders are great for everyone. I'm going to start with the question that came in. Good morning, Nicole and Mitzi and Christine and Linda and DA. Hey there. So the question that came in was, what is the Clutter Boss's view or system on clearing a property after a death? I read in a book to take pictures of each room or closet in our own home and not bring any item that does not have an established home by looking at these pictures. What are your thoughts? So when you are clearing an estate after somebody passes, it can be very tempting to bring a lot of stuff into your house. The stuff, usually in our minds, it represents the person. Looking at it can be a really beautiful reminder of that person. And we have an emotional connection to things in other people's homes, especially if it was our childhood home or if it was a parent or a sibling who passed. I mean, it feels like the connection feels strong. And that can lead to just a lot of stuff coming in. So when you're clearing an estate, and I have been involved in a lot of estate situations, I think communication is really important. So number one, make sure that there is open and clear and documented communication between anyone who would be considered a stakeholder. So anyone who has some ownership over the items in the estate. It may be the case that some people want nothing to do with the estate, and it may be the case that some people want everything and everything to do with the estate. So you want to have really clear conversations about who, if there's certain things that are going to a certain person, if the estate needs to be cleared out in a certain time period. You want to really get all of those details sorted out. And you want to be as non-judgmental as possible when it comes to, and this can be really, really tricky, when it comes to grieving and estates. Everyone is going to have their own filter that they're looking at this process through, and everyone is going to have their own comfort level with the process. So you really want to be understanding of the fact that you're going to approach this a certain way. It's possible that not everyone else involved in this process is going to approach it the same way. And there could be many different reasons for that. So just be really clear in your communication, who's doing what, who wants to take what the timeline is, if there's a financial obligation, how that's getting sorted out. Get those details in writing, very clear and as non-emotional as possible. When it comes to what is coming into your house, my best tip is before you go into the house, before you go into the estate, and maybe even go someplace where you're not in your own house, where you can have a really clear head. Make a list of, say, your top 10 things that you would love to bring into your own space. So without being in the space, without being in your space, think through what are your top 5, top 10 items that are really meaningful and important to you, and you really would love to have them in your own space. You have space for them. Or if you don't have space, if it's a big item like a piece of furniture, really think through where is it going to go in your space? Do you need to remove other things for it to come in? Like, have that all thought out in advance. When we're in the space of the person who passed, it can be very difficult to have that kind of macro view of what is most important, because when you see something and when you're surrounded by the stuff that represents the life of the person who passed, everything seems more meaningful and more significant. So if you can have a plan beforehand, what, like, without being in the space, what actually do you love or did you love, or what feels the most connected to the person, go in with that list that you've made not being in the space. And then also think about how much space you actually have in your home to bring stuff in. And if you're a follower of Clutter Boss, it's probably because you don't have a lot of extra space in your house. And frankly, a lot of people do. It's hard to come up with anyone I know who has extra space in their house. So if you're planning on bringing stuff in, be really, really clear with yourself how much you can actually bring into your space. What I have seen a lot is people bring in boxes and bins and stack them in their garage, and then they just sit there for years. So if you're planning to bring stuff into your house for sorting, have a really solid plan with accountability as to how you're going to get through this stuff, because what happens is we have the best intentions, but the reality is this is a time consuming process. I would highly recommend bringing as little as possible into your own house and doing as much sorting and dispersing of the items one time. Like, touch it once, right? I think there's probably like a little decluttering saying, like, handle it once or whatever. Handle it as little as possible. If you're packing it up, moving into your house, moving it into the garage, and then unpacking it and going through it, that's a lot of extra time. So anything you can do on site, that's the best thing. If you have questions related to estates, pop them into the comments. Just be really mindful of what you're bringing into your space. The person who passed away, I believe their intention was never to burden you with stuff. When our parents, for example, want us to take on their items, if they've raised us to believe that, this stuff is really important, that comes, put it into context as to where that mindset comes from, because our parents were raised by parents who lived through the depression, and literally it was a blessing to pass stuff along. That is not the case any longer in most cases. We have access to more stuff than we've ever had access to ever in the history of humanity. The intention is to bless you, not burden you. And so just really keep that intention in mind and be really ruthless with what that means in your life. Is all of this stuff a blessing or is it a burden? And let's just lean towards blessing as much as possible. Okay, so that was a great question. Thank you to the person who submitted it. A couple of side notes of things that came up while I was doing some coaching calls this morning. There was a question about, or there was a situation that we were talking about with sorting a lot of small items like knickknacks, tchotchkes, like all of that sort of stuff. So when you have a collection that involves many small items, and I really remember observing this with my in-home clients years ago, when we look at a collection of a lot of small items, it overwhelms our brain. I think that there's like an eye-brain connection where it's visually too stimulating to see lots of little things, and it creates confusion and overwhelm, which is something that makes it very difficult to actually make decisions. When you're confused, when you're overwhelmed, your body kind of shuts down and your decision-making ability really plummets. What you can do if you have a large collection of small items, I would look at those items in smaller groupings out of context. I would take, 5 to 10 at a time out of the space they're in, bring them into another space and look at them as a much smaller group so that your brain can process them more easily. I also would really encourage you to get to zero. When you have a big collection of small items, it's very easy to leave the stuff that is the most confusing to figure out what to do with back in that box or back in that drawer, or just kind of say, I got through most of it. I don't need to finish up here. And it's always those like random little things that they don't have a home, they don't have a purpose. They're just trash, really, but we just don't know what to do with them or where to put them. Force yourself, if you have a collection of items, that's a lot of little things, or really with any collection that you're working on, to declutter it down to zero, which means that there is not one single thing left that you need to make a decision on. And if the decision is to keep it, make sure you're keeping it with with clarity around where it's going to live, what is it? Like what category does it belong with? Where are you storing it? So, get yourself to actually finish out the collection, but don't necessarily look at the collection all at once. Break it up into smaller parts. I hope that that's helpful. Another note from this morning was a conversation about electronic records or all records. So just a good reminder when we're talking about papers and online transactions, your information is online, whether or not you're accessing it online. So it's in a big database someplace. There is no organization right now that is not storing your information electronically. Even if you're not accessing your bank account electronically, it exists electronically, right? It's not like when you sign up for an account, they put all of your information online. It's when you sign up for an account, they give you access to your information that's already online. So whether or not you're accessing your information electronically, it is already there. So maybe that's a little motivator to help get rid of your paper records. If you hesitate to use electronic records, just remember that you using your electronic records doesn't dictate whether the records are being stored electronically. They are. So maybe that can be a little helpful note there. Another thing that came up, boundaries. Oh my gosh. The best little note that I ever had that helped me understand boundaries was oftentimes when we set boundaries with other people, it may seem like it's a punishment, or it may seem punishing to them that you're setting a boundary, but the purpose of a boundary is to preserve the relationship and not to continue to go down a path of destroying the relationship. So even if it seems like setting a boundary with somebody else might be hurtful, your intention is to protect whatever the relationship is and not allow it to get worse. And that helped me a lot with my understanding of boundaries, and maybe that will help you with your understanding of boundaries also. Okay, that was all the little notes that I had here for today's Ask a Clutter Boss. I appreciate you all being here today live. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. And if you have a question for next week, make sure to submit it. And I look forward to talking with all y'all then. Have a great day, everyone.